And we are opening a blank workbook to do database stuff. All right, so blank workbook, we'll come to the code, insert a module. Here I am, book 1, that looks great. Insert, module, sub. Let's start off just with seeing the VBA approach to getting data. Get data. I want to get data per se. Okay, so here's the first critical thing. When we're going to connect directly up to a database engine, we need to have a different set of objects that are not kind of loaded into memory by default. All this stuff when we're creating a new worksheet or we're creating a chart or something, all those objects are part of Excel. They come along, they're always available to us. The database objects, they're more advanced things, and so it's a lot of overhead in these objects. They say, you know what, we're not even going to let VBA know about these objects unless you specifically tell the environment we're going to use these objects. And so we need to do, let's see, I'll just put this here in the notes, tools, references, the Microsoft ActiveX data objects library. This is just a comment. So, but we have to do that here. So we come to Tools right here inside of the Visual Basic Editor, Tools, References, and then we got to scroll down to the Microsoft ActiveX Data or something. Probably type that in. ActiveX Data Objects Library 6.1 is the current version. Make sure you're not down here in the record set. We just need the ActiveX Data Objects. Make sure you get the check mark by it, and then say OK. This doesn't change anything visually, but you're telling the VBA interpreter there's a set of objects that I want to have access to. Let me have access to. Once we have that, we can create the objects that we need. And we have to create 2 objects. Let's create the first one. Is there some question on this? Yeah? Getting to this part? You need to review that?
Which one did you select?
So the question is, when I set these references, where am I setting them for? Is it for this instance of Excel, or is it part of the workbook? And the answer is that reference gets set in the workbook, so that when this workbook goes to a different place, the reference goes with it. So the reason I'm putting this in a comment here is that if you download this workbook some other time, and you just look at the example here, it will not work unless you've done this part. You've got to go and add the reference. But if you copy this workbook and then modify it, it'll be just fine no matter where you take it. Unless it's to a really, really old computer that doesn't have that reference. But you've got to go back 10 years before that reference would not work. So that's about how long the 6.1 version's been out. Okay, so now let's declare a couple of variables. I'm going to need 2 things. Number 1, I have to establish a connection to the database. That's a connection object. So here's how we do it. I'm just going to call it CN, short for connection, as a new ADODB, Active Data Object, or maybe ActiveX Data Object, database, dot connection. That's what we're after. This will not show up in your list unless you've already made the reference. You successfully made that reference. So if you're getting the IntelliSense help on this, give yourself a pat on the back. You're in good shape. Let's just start with that. Let's now declare another variable. We have another object that we'll have to make ultimately, but we'll go baby steps. Let's dim something called a connection string. Actually, we'll use that as a constant, and that's what we have in the notes. So if we go back to Learning Suite and we follow that link for here, VBA database notes, follow that link. Let's just copy this first line right here. I like to put my constants at the very top. So here's const, connection string. Difference between a constant and a variable? Someone want to enlighten me? What's the difference?
Doesn't change.
Almost nothing. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. It's a location in memory that has a value. I refer to that value by the nickname that I give it. The difference is once I give it its value, it stays. So this is going to be a constant called connection string, and here it is. Maybe I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to just bring this down so we can see it and talk about it. Let's come over here and talk about it here. Okay, so this line says, hey, we're going to make a constant. The nickname is going to be connection string. And then everything here is what we're telling it. We're telling it several things. Listen, we're going to make this connection using a specific data provider. It's called the SQL OLE DB. Structured Query Language, Object Linking and Embedding Database. That's what all that stands for. Usually when you have an acronym, it's like 3 or 4 letters. This is a long one. The data source, this is the server that we're going to interact with. So a number of years ago, when my kids were baking at the Colonial Heritage Festival, I thought it might be nice to have a URL, colonialbakehouse.com. We've never used it for anything except for this database class, so for this class. So there it is. So I bought the domain name, and there's hosting out there, which I continue to pay money for because it's convenient. Okay. The initial catalogs, there's a database out there called VBA. This is set up just for this. I provide a user ID. So here's the connection credentials. They're built right into the connection string. VBA user, that's the username, and the password. The Alamo returns. I have no idea what I was thinking when I made that password, but that's the password. The Alamo something car rental company, I just don't know, but the Alamo returns was the one. Okay, so that's what we're saying. So we're saying, listen, that's the information that we need. That's the information that the SQL OLEDB provider needs to be able to make a connection. It needs to know what database to connect to, or which host to connect to. Did we tell it a port? We talked about using a port. Did we tell it a port? We didn't. So this is going to be SQL Server is the default provider here that we're using for SQL OLEDB. So why does this work if we don't tell it a port? I mean, last time we had to tell it port 5901. It's using the default port, which is 1433. We could specify the port. We don't need to. Okay, good.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So when it says initial, is that a initial catalog?
Initial catalog. So the question is this a data type? And the answer is no. What we're looking at in this connection string is we are seeing named values. So here is, this is like an attribute. The attribute is provider, and the value is SQL OLEDB. There's another one, data source. That's the parameter. And then after the equal sign comes colonialbakehouse.com.
Oh, so this is all just right?
Yeah, this is just, it's the information that the provider needs to be able to make the connection. We're giving it all the information to connect to that database and bring the data back. Question in the back.
Are there spaces? Is it data source and spaces between those two? Or
Is there
there's the line
spaces?
break, there's data.
Yes, there's a space there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have. The line would not have broken.
Okay.
And again, you don't have to. You could type this in if you really wanted to, but there's a link to it on today's day in Learning Suite. You could type all that. Okay, so far this is nothing but a collection of characters, right? We've said, hey, this is a constant collection of characters stored in memory somewhere. Now, again, we are declaring an object variable of type ADODB connection. What's this keyword new do here? Without that, what this would say is make a connection. It's an object variable, so it's enough memory to hold a reference to some other location in memory. It's enough memory for a memory address. And the type of variable that we can, or the type of object we are allowed to connect that variable up to is going to be this connection object. But when we put the keyword new here, what does it do? It does something magical and miraculous. What happens?
Dynamic memory allocation.
Dynamic memory allocation.
That's what new means in other languages.
It's not so far off here. But in this case, what happens is we are saying, create an instance of this object, and then bind this variable to its location. So it's not just, so here we're not just creating a variable that can point at this object, we're creating a variable that can point to that object, and we're creating one of those objects, and we're connecting that variable up to the object. That new is doing a lot. All right, so now we're ready to open that connection using the connection string that we had. So cn dot open. And the first thing it says is it needs a connection string. Well, we have a connection string. In fact, our connection string is called connection string. What's that?
Very creative name.
It's very creative, yes. Hopefully it would be, give you some guidance here. Now, you'll notice the next optional argument here is, it's optional, I can tell it's optional because it's in square brackets, is a user ID. Do we need to supply a user ID? No, because it was specified in the connection string. It's possible to leave the user ID and the password out of the connection string and then supply that here. Depending on the provider, it may allow you to do that or may not allow you to do that. In this case, we're putting it all in the connection string, so all we have to say is open up the connection string. Now, we're going to close it. cn.close. So I'm going to work between my open and my close, but inside here is while I've got that connection open. At this point, it would be great to run that code and see if it runs without an error. It's taking longer than I want it to run. I hope it works for me. So it ultimately went through. So it made the connection, answered it, and closed it. If I had an error, that means we didn't connect. It's kind of, pretty boring code right now. No error just means things went okay. If you're executing this code now and you get an error, now's the time for us to take a look at it so we can get that going. We have not yet asked for any data. All we've done is said, open up the conduit through the so-called internet to the server that has the data we're trying to connect. Anyone need help here? How many of you are executing this code without error? Okay, now with that connection open, we can now ask for some data. We need another kind of variable to do that. dim rs as a new record set. Oops, ADODB dot record set. So record set now is another object. So our first object, the connection object, just has the methods and properties that it takes to get connected to a database. It has a method that would allow us to execute like a query that would change data. We want to insert data or delete data or update data, make a new table. The connection is enough to do that. But if I want to ask for data back, that takes a record set object. And so that's what this one's for. Maybe we should put a comment on that one. Required to get data back from a remote database. Okay, so while the connection is open, now I can open the record set. rs.open. Now it wants to know, what am I asking for? I'll just put in the structured query language statement right here. Select star from cust. There's a table out there called cust. It's not profanity, it's short for customer. Comma, and then it needs to know which connection do you want to open this record set against. Would it be possible for me to have one connection open to this database, a different connection open to a different database, a different connection open to a different database, all on one sub-procedure? Sure. That's why I have to tell it which connection I want to open it onto. So what do I put here? CN, the name of the connection object that we have open. Then again, just before I'll close, I'm going to say rs.close. Let me close the record set. And so now, again, I'm opening the connection, opening the record set. I'll do some stuff in there, close the record set, close the connection. Whew. So let's just go ahead and print something out. Debug.print. rs.fields, in quotes, first name. I happen to know there's a first name field in this database, in this table. Dot value. Okay, so the record set object has a collection called fields. Inside that collection is a field object for each of the columns in the table. I'm identifying a specific one of these, then I'm asking for the value. I should be able to run that. It should print something down here in the immediate window. James. James? Anyone here named James? No? Pity, it was your lucky day. James. You would have got a gold star.
So why did you just print one name?
Aha! Is this just a short, tiny table with one record in it? The answer is no, it's got several. I don't have a whole lot. It's got dozens. 24, 36. So why did it only print one? Here's the trick. A record set is the object that will give me access to the whole set of records, but I can only get one at a time. It has a method called move next. And so I deal with the record that I want, and then I tell the record set, move to the next record. And then I've got that record kind of queued up and ready in the fields, in that collection of fields. And then I say, move to the next one. And then I've got that one queued up and ready. So let's take a look. Who asked that question? Very good. Good question. It's an important question. Okay, so now let's do this. Let me create a do loop right here. Do loop. Don't run it. Well, it just says do loop because you just create an endless loop. We've got to tell it something to change to the next record. What is it? rs dot move next. So now we'll print the first one. It'll move to the next one, back to the top, print the next one. And that should, I'm going to say, it's a good idea to save. Anytime I got in a loop, who knows, maybe I've done something wrong. Whoops, I was going to hit save, I hit play. It's printed off a bunch of them, and then we get an error. Either BOF or EOF is true. Who makes these things up? What the heck does BOF mean? Beginning of file. Yeah, beginning of file or end of file. What it's saying is, here's what happens. When you're looking at a record set, you're looking at a record with the record set, you say move next, it goes to the next one. Great, goes to the next one, goes to the next one, but ultimately it gets to the very last one. And then you say move next, it goes past the last record into no man's land, called EOF, end of file. You try to move next again when you're on, after you're already on EOF, and it goes, there's nowhere to go. I got nothing to do. This error isn't quite sure if we're past the last record going down, or if we've moved. There's one called move prior or move previous, or if we're moving up till we got to the BOF, no man's land at the top, and then tried to keep going. And so we'll end that, and we'll put an until. Do until rs.eof. EOF is a property. It gets set to true once I've moved into no man's land. Once I've moved off that last record, kind of get this one time where we go, oh, it's the last record. It seems weird that you have to actually move off the last record to know it, but the truth is, the record set object doesn't know how long the record, doesn't know how many records are there. Until it says, give me another record, and the database goes, there's no more. And that's when the record set goes, I'm at the end of the file. And it kind of goes into this kind of place where we're not looking at any record, but we've set this flag to say we're at the end of it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and we'll do the last first name, comma, we'll do a space. We concatenate in a space, and then we'll also bring in the last name. So now what that should do is it should print off the data. Turns out there's some data at the beginning, and then I think my students in the last semester put some pretty bad data in here. But that's okay. You can probably make some more bad data yourselves today. So there's a few records. Okay, any questions so far? All right. Yes, in the back.
So, do until rs.eof, you don't say equals true or anything, or does it default to true? Or?
Aha! The question is, shouldn't we say equals true? By the way, when we first start, let me put a breakpoint right here and I'm going to run it. I'll run it. Then let's just ask what rs.eof is. So right now, rs.eof is false, meaning we haven't moved past the data. We're not at the end of the file, we're still looking at valid data. And so this itself is a Boolean value. So this itself is either true or false. And until, what comes after until needs to be something that's either true or false. This property is itself true or false. If it made you feel better, you could say until it equals true. Because then, when this is false, as it is right now, the condition we're looking at is false equals true, which is false. So this is fine. Does it take a little bit more processing power to do this? Yes, but it's minuscule. It is negligible. So if you find that easier to read, feel free to add that equals true on the back. But it doesn't change how it executes. I mean, technically it's doing one more comparison, but it's going to be logically the same. All right, other questions? Okay, let's. Oh, there's a question.
Anyway, like the whole thing is an array, like the whole field.
Question is there? Could you load the whole thing into an array? Yes. You have to make an array, and then you have to load the values in using a loop.
Oh, exactly.
What's that sort of?
You have to use the same like next.
Yeah, you're going to move next. Yeah. I think your question is there some way using the record set object just to say, give me all the data in one fell swoop? And the answer is no, not using this object. All right, so let's go ahead and, instead of printing this out to the immediate window, let's write this out to the active sheet. So instead of print, now here's the problem. We don't know what all the columns are. But the good news is the record set object knows which columns it has. So we can just ask for the record set object to do it. So let's do this. Before we start putting the data, let's do this. Let's make a for loop. So I'll need a control variable for my for loop. So up here in my dim area, dim x has an integer. For x equals 0 to rs.fields, it is a collection, so it has a count property. So if there are 5 fields, what's my count property going to be? 5. It'll tell me how many fields there are, how many columns there are. They're numbered starting at 0, and so in this case, I want to go from 0 for x equals 0 to field count -1. Next, or next. Debug.print rs now dot fields. 2 dots in here. Now, before we get like first name, last name, customer ID, whatever. In this case, I'm just going to put X. Collections that have names can go either by the name or by the ordinal value. That's the case here. And now instead of printing the value, I want to print the name. This will actually just print off the names of those fields. I'm going to put a breakpoint just before my second loop and run that. That'll just show me what the names of those fields are. Customer ID, first name, last name, street address, city, state, postal code, country. So those are the columns in the table that I'm working with. We following this okay? Which record are we on? We've just gone across all these field names. So which record are we on? We're still on the first record. We have not executed a move next, and so we're on that first record. That's where we are. Okay, well look, folks, instead of writing out to the immediate window, let's write this out to the active sheet. Let's just put it in row 1. So instead of printing this, let's just say, active sheet, I guess we'll just, oops. If we don't tell it which sheet we're talking about, it'll be the active sheet. So I'll say cells, row number 1, column number, what do you think? X plus 1, very good. Dot value equals the name. This is going to put right across that first row the names of my columns. That'll be so nice. If we wanted to, while we're at it, we could say that same cell dot font dot bold equals true. Make it bold. We can change the background color. Dot interior. That cell dot interior. Did I spell that right? That cell dot color equals RGB. You just want some gray. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. So why don't we say 200, 200, 200? Those should be commas. I'm just going to go ahead and run that. Again, I'll just drag my active
This is spelling on value.
value. L. Thank you. Now on my active sheet, that should have put a little header right across here. Very nice. So what we're talking about here is write the header to the table. So now I'm ready to do this, write the data out, but instead of doing a debug.print, I'm going to do that would be very similar to this. I need to keep track of which row I'm on, so let me declare row as a long. We start row out at 2. And then I'm going to have a loop similar to this one inside, right? Because for every row I'm on, I've got to write the values out. Go to the next row, write the values out. Go to the next row, write the values out. So I have the same thing here. So I'm actually going to copy the same thing that I did with the names. Now I don't need the names. So I'm not going to print the name, I'm going to be printing the value. And I don't need this other stuff where I'm changing it to bold and gray background. So now cells row, I'll start at 2. And then X will start at 0, and so it should go each time. So this then should write the data out to the current row. I've got to do one more thing with my row variable. What is it? I've got to increment it. Row equals row plus 1. Don't need to do my debug.print anymore. Then we move next. So we get to this. So we've written out the header. We get to this one. We're going to write out. Here we're going to write out all the values from the first row. We'll move to the next row. Back to the top. We'll hit this again. Write all the values out. So that should give us an error. Application. Well, it's probably because I hadn't executed my row number 2. So I'm just going to stop this and run it again. And now we've brought in that data. Whew, that was a lot of work. But we did that just through the VBA, or just without VBA last time we were together, didn't we? And wasn't there something up here like data, external data from other sources, or what was it? Did we do this? From database? Yeah, so we did all that. Now, so, and it was even prettier back then because it came in looking very blue. It was nice. So, why do this? What's the answer? Well, you might need to do something other than just dump the data in. You might need to read that data and just look through it without ever writing it to a worksheet. Plus, it kind of gets us familiar with what we're about to do. Questions? How many of you don't quite have this code working yet? You're trying, you're not quite there yet. All right, let's go ahead and pause and make sure you get there, and then we'll move on. All right, so for reading data, we're good here. But the whole point of doing VBA here is that it allows us to do something we can't just do through the Excel interface, and that is change the data. So let's make another sub procedure. I'll put it at the top. You can put it at the bottom. That's fine. Sub insert customer. And then we're going to do some of the same things. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move my constant from being declared inside of my sub procedure. I'm going to make it a module level constant. I'm going to declare it out here outside the procedure. And now I'll dim CN as a connection. Actually, as a new ADODB connection. I'll open just the same way that we did before.
So is that ADODB? Is that just like VBA's method for understanding that we're creating a new object?
Good question is that ADODB just VBA's way of making a new object? And the answer is no, it's not VBA's way.
Driver.
So this is an object. This is built in as a part of Windows. This is just an object that comes with Windows. But this is how we're telling it to create one of those objects. So we have a way to create a new worksheet object. We just say, worksheets.add. And that makes a new worksheet. And when we make a new worksheet in Excel, it does some stuff to it. Here, what we're doing is we're saying we need to be able to create a new connection, different kind of object. It's not one that's built into Excel. It's not part of Excel. It's part of Windows. And so this is the part that we're saying, yeah, make me a new one of these objects. VBA itself does not know how to connect to a database. VBA itself knows how to write a file, knows how to open a file. There's lots of things VBA can do. Connecting to a database is not one of the things that VBA does. So what we're doing is we are invoking an object that has code built into it that knows how to connect to a database. And that's how we refer to it. So I now open it with a connection string. I'll close it. Now this one's going to be a little more complicated. So down here, we had a structured query language statement just to give me the records from the customer table. That's pretty simple. This one's going to take a little more massaging. And so let's start with creating a variable called SQL. Then in here, let's go ahead and establish its value. In fact, I think that's one of the things that I had in the notes from today. Just going to copy the other two lines below on that notes from today. We'll bring those lines in. So ultimately, here's what we're going to do. We are going to say insert into our table called cust. Remember, down here when we selected it, we selected all the columns from cust. Now the statement's going to be insert into cust. We're going to tell it the comma-separated list of columns that we want to insert a value into. I want to put a value in the first name, into the last name, the street address, city, state, zip code. Let's do this. Let's back this up. I'm gonna copy these two lines. Ultimately, I'm going to come back to these, so I'm going to comment them out. These first two. And let me back these off. So all we're talking about is first name and last name. Let's start this off a little bit more simply. Then I'm going to delete everything in the second part, right up to there. So my statement is going to say, I'm setting out SQL to equal, insert into cust, first name and last name in parentheses. And then in a separate line, I'm going to say, I'm going to give a new value to SQL. What's it going to be? What it already is. And then I'm going to concatenate on here the word values. And then first name, last name. In fact, at this point, I am going to do debug.print. With SQL, I'll put a breakpoint on where I'm closing the database, and I'll run that. This should be very boring. I'm going to run this. All it's going to do is print off my SQL statement. So this is the statement that I'm preparing to execute. As it turns out, I can execute this statement, and it would execute okay. What would it put into my database?
First name, last name.
Bracket, first name. I really want to put a first name in there. But what I've done here is I've said, let me set up a template. Let me set up a string with a valid structured query language statement that I can kind of modify step by step without kind of going crazy with, did I put the comma in the right place and the quote in the right place? Give me the template set up right, and now let's modify that template. So let's do this. We need to have some way to establish these values. So why don't we go just kind of build a new worksheet, back to Excel. I'll build a new worksheet here. So maybe I'll put it in the same worksheet. So I'm safe kind of over here to column K. I'll do it over here past column K. Let me just put first name, last name, Looks like I have conflicted about how I want to do capitalization here, but that's okay. Maybe I'll put some borders on this so it looks pretty. Oops. Go to home. Some kind of borders. All borders. The idea here, over here in L2 and L3, let's put our new president-elect. What's his name? Donald Trump. If you had Donald Trump as a customer, that'd be pretty good as long as he paid his bill. So what I want to do, here's the idea. I want to take whatever data is sitting right here at the moment that I run that sub-procedure, and that's the data I want to push into the database. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and put a button right over here. That might make it a little more handy. So my developer tab, come to my little insert tool, and the first one is a button. I'll draw that in here. I want to do insert customer. Insert. All right. So I click this now, won't do anything because I don't have the code finished yet. But the idea now is I want to look at whatever is here. I want to modify my SQL template, and then I want to tell the connection, here's the statement to execute. It's the instruction that tells the database engine, put this data in. All right. So see where those are in L2 and L3. So here I've got my SQL. Now let's modify it again. SQL equals replace. I'm going to start with SQL, look at the SQL string, look for something, and replace it with something. I want to look for where it says first name. So instead of I want to look for where it says first name, and I want to replace it with range. What did I say? L2. Range L2 dot value. So if I go back and run that line, I should see that I've adapted my structured query language statement now to have the first name Donald in there. That looks great.
Is that I2? Is the range?
What's that? It's L2. Let me put it a capital L so you can see it as an L. And then I'll do the same thing, except I'll do it with last name. And it will be L3. And now we've gotten the whole. So at this point, we said, well, let's go ahead and look on the worksheet to put in there. We've got a template that's kind of got the commas and the quotes just exactly where we want them, so that when we go to execute this, we get a valid insert statement to be able to execute. Now we just want to execute that statement. Here's the good news, folks. It's really easy. cn.execute. And then I just tell it the command I want to execute, which is SQL. So I'm going to go ahead and execute that line, take out my breakpoint, run the whole thing. Now I'll come and run get data. And that should bring that data in, and I should now have at the very bottom new customer Donald Trump. I have not specified any of the other data. So this idea then of saying I got a structured query language statement and a parameterized. Is there any magical thing in SQL with those angle brackets that I used? Is that anything defined in SQL? No. This is just me defining a string with something in here that I feel confident that I can do a replace, define that, and put in the actual value. Questions?
So replace the VBA.
Replace is part of the VBA language. It says, look at this string, find every occurrence of this, and replace it with this. Now, let's go add, we're going to need a little luck in our country, I'm convinced. So we need a customer who's a leprechaun. What would be a leprechaun's name? Seamus. How do you spell Seamus? A in the U.S. Is that close enough? Seamus O'Leary. O-L-E-A-R-Y. Hopefully, with Seamus O'Leary in place, we're going to make it for the next week. Or next 8 years. If only we can get Seamus in the database. You see what's going to happen? Do you see the problem I'm setting us up for? Let me run this and let's see what happens. Oh, an error. Incorrect syntax near Leary. I'm a little leery of that error message. Incorrect syntax near Leary. Let's take a look. Let me do a debug.print. Oh, no, I did. Here it is. I guess you can't see this because my font's a little small. Put this into something I can change the font. Let's take a look at it. It does have to do with the single quote. Let's pretend that we're the database management system. We're trying to understand what's going on here. Insert into cust. It goes, I totally get this, right? Insert, it's a statement. It's like one of the 6 statements in structured query language. I got it. Insert into, that's part of the insert statement. Cust, that's a table name. I forgot the table name. Open parenthesis, just what I was expecting. First name, comma, last name. Are those real column names in the customer table? Yeah, perfect. Moving on. Close parenthesis, that's the end of the list. We get to the values. Aha, here's the values you're going to put in. Here's the first value, single quote. It's a collection of characters. After the single quote, perfect. Got the comma. Here's the next one, single quote. We got an O, single quote, are done. And it gets to here and goes, what the heck are you talking about? What's the problem? Yeah, it's the same problem we had when we tried to put a double quote inside a double quote terminated string. How do we fix that problem in VBA? Escape it. I don't think we escape. I didn't talk about escaping anything.
Well, you can use escape keys.
Nope, no escape sequence allowed. Do we not know how to put a single quote into a quote into a quote?
No.
I got a string. What's I heard it? What?
You use a double on the outside.
Use a who?
Double quote.
Oh, so here's your thought. Maybe what we could do is use double quotes out here, and then the single quote would be okay. Some languages, they say, you know what, you can do your strings either with single quotes or double quotes. That way you can solve the problem this way. Not in structured query language or VBA. Single quote in VBA means comment. Double quote in SQL typically means, this is a column name I'm talking about. It's how we identify a column name. So double quotes won't do it. Have I not taught? I have been remiss in my training. I have not taught you how to put a quote inside a quote terminated string. It's possible that we can be this far in the class. I've never mentioned. Let's look at VBA real quick. Let me just say I want to print something that says hello or hell, oh, and then in quotes, gov. That's me. It's the same problem, right? It sees that quote and it thinks it's the end of the string, and so when it gets to here, it goes, no can do. Oh, can't do that, all right? Oh, that's really close. It thinks this is a variable called gov, and it's trying to print that. Let's get out the message box. It will fail on that for sure. Expected end of statement. Okay, it gets to right here and it goes, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. So here's the trick. If I want to put a quote inside a quote terminated string, I just double it up. Does this sound familiar yet? Have I really not taught you this? Amazing. This now says, here's where the string starts. Pop, 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 pop. It gets to this quote right here, and it goes, I think that's the end of the quote. I think that's the end of the string literal. But wait, let me check and see if the next one is a quote. And if it is a quote, I know that's not really the end. It's just a quote on the inside of the quote. Terminated string. That seems weird to me, but that's how you do it. that will put up hello gov. And those quotes that I had double quoted are interpreted just as single quotes, as single double quotes. They're written as double quotes. So when it sees those two right next to each other, it goes, aha, it's a trick! He's trying to trick me. That's not really the end of the string. It's just a quote inside. That's exactly what we do in SQL as well. And so right here, I'm going to put two single quotes. And the SQL interpreter will look at that and go, aha, that's just a quote inside.
But you don't need to like single quotes around. You don't need to do multiple.
Well, I have the single quotes here that are on the outside. This is the one that's defining the whole string, saying everything inside here is the actual string I'm trying to manipulate. And because I'm putting a single quote on the inside, so that it doesn't terminate the string, I have to give both. Got it? So, that's the reason that when I try to run this, it says no can do. And that's why it says the error is here by Leary. It understands everything up to that O. It understands everything up to right here, and it gets, because that's just fine, right? That's just a little string that's putting there. It gets to here and goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. What is this? No idea. So how do we do it? Do we concatenate it? We could do some concatenation. That would be kind of hard.
You just replace with 1 to 2, right?
Yes. Here's what we're going to do. Right here, instead of just dumping this right in, we'll do another replace. Ooh, a replace on the inside of a replace? Sure. Go crazy. Instead of just range L2.value replace, comma, I like to write the syntax in first while I'm thinking about it. I've got a couple of strings we're doing here. And then looking for a single quote, and I replace. Looking for a single quote. I'm replacing it with two single quotes. Folks, I got to tell you, that's an ugly line. You go make it a little bit bigger for you to see it. So, R-E-P-L, I better spell replace right. So I'm going to kind of break this out so we can see it. Here's the three arguments. Replace says we're looking at SQL, we're looking for first name, and then we're replacing it with the result of this replace. This replace says look at what's in L2, look for a string literal that's a single quote, and replace it with a string literal that's two single quotes.
Is that the last name?
This is the first name. We have to do the same thing for last name as well. For me, I put last name in L3. Could you replace at the end? What do you mean?
Do the first name, last name, and then do the SQL equals SQL replace.
Oh, here's a question. Could I, after we do this, come here at the end and say, now let's just find all the single quotes inside my SQL statement and replace them? The answer is no, because if we look at that SQL statement, here's the SQL statement we're trying to work with. If I look at this whole thing and replace the single quotes, the only one I want to replace is that one. And if I run the replace on the whole thing, it's going to find this one, this one, this one, and this one's going to do them all. So no, I've got to do it on what's inside of these quotes. Yeah, it's a little bit ugly. But the good news is it's not any more ugly. We're done. That's it. I mean, I've got to do the same thing for L3. Now I should be able to add Seamus O'Leary without error. I don't want a button to refresh my data. Developer, tools. Data. function should pull in the data, the ones I've added, plus the ones you've added. Here's Seamus O'Leary, Shane O'Farrell, some more O'Learys, some last names. Donald Dump makes America great again. Advertisement, brought to you by a class member. Okay. So this thing right here, where you say the one character that could make things go haywire here is a single quote. We've got to treat it specially. Other than that, we should be okay. Questions? So you have a new project due 2 weeks from today, where this is the heart and soul of the project. Essentially, I'm giving you like 50 files that I got from the FBI. I think I told you, they sent me the master disk, did I tell you? Yeah. These are the ones I got off the master disk before I sent it back to him. So it's like crime statistics. Crimes, is it from universities? I think it might be crimes on university campuses known to law enforcement. In fact, why don't we take a minute? It's probably worth a minute to kind of look over this at this point. So let me find that. So let's see. Project automating database modification. Okay, university crimes. So I'm giving you an access database. So instead of working with SQL Server, you're going to work against a local copy for access database. Here's the assignment file. Now I'm going to download the data. Here's the data. What if I could open up one of these without actually extracting it? Let's go to Texas. This is hideous, but this is the way that the FBI supplies this data. Couldn't you give this to us in a comma-separated file? The answer is no. This is how you get it. So here's what this file says. It's looking at Table 9. They're all Table 9. Table 9 is this table. Doesn't matter what state it is, it's all Table 9. Offenses known to law enforcement, university and college for 2011. Here it is. Abilene Christian University. They had this many students. During the whole year in 2011, there were 4 violent crimes. What were they? They were all aggravated assault. I don't know why that's the crime of choice, but that's what it is there. But there's 101 property crimes, and they are split up into here. So first thing to realize is that these columns are not raw data. These columns are summary. The raw data are the next 4 that follow. So there's 5 burglaries, 95 larcenies, 1 motor vehicle theft, and no arson. These guys are really underachievers. We look at the arson numbers for BYU. These guys had nothing. This next school, 60,000 students, they had 4 cases of arson. So, here's what you have to do. In this assignment, you've got to write a program that looks across not just this file, but all of the files. There's like 50 of them here. Look at this data and write an insert statement that says, oh, here's the information for murder, 0. Forcible rape, 0. Robbery, 0. Aggravated assault, 4. Each one of those is going to be a separate insert statement based on the structure of the data. In fact, let's just take a look at the data. This is not a simple project. Folks, this is the 5th of 6 projects. They're getting harder. I'm not so sure the form project, and the Boggle project was in increasing order of difficulty. But this one is definitely hard. I would say this is the hardest one we've done so far. Here then is the database that you got to put this data into. It's not just a simple thing of reading that line off the Excel workbook and writing a similar line into the database, because the data here look very differently. One row just says, here it is, 2010. This is from Alaska. the school's University of Alaska, Anchorage campus, and it's the enrollment. That's all that's there. So that one line from the Excel file gets translated into 9 lines here, an enrollment, and then 4 violent crimes and 4 property crimes. I give you some help in doing this. So I'm giving you, I think I've given you the template already to work with. But you've still got to make something that goes through those files and works with them. Realizing now you're going to need to know how to process a set of files, which I don't think we've done yet. So we may have to adjust things for Wednesday. I may have to show you that so that you're getting ready for the project. Here's the bad news, folks. We don't meet next week. What we do on Monday, I'm just doing an exam review. For those of you who want to get a jump start on your Thanksgiving break, that would be an optional class. So this is a hard project. When you want to, don't try to do it after Thanksgiving dinner because your mind won't be with you. You need to be clear on this. Reminder on the projects. I had a substantial number of students last semester, I taught this, share code on this project. It just got to where they went, oh my gosh, it's too much, I can't do it. And they were like, I'm just going to borrow someone else's code. Would that be a violation of the honor code? That would be. Would it be a violation of the honor code to give your code to someone else? Yeah. I had one student give a full solution to his buddy. And I deducted him a full grade for doing that. And he felt so abused, as if he had not done anything wrong by giving his solution to a fellow student. That would be a violation of the honor code. So, at this point, I probably haven't given you an example of how to process through those files one at a time, but it might be a good idea this week, while we're still around, to get started on this. Can I work through that file, get the data, and format the tertiary query language tables and get them to exit? Go ahead.
I just have one question. For that database we've been reading from, why don't we have delete or update permissions?
Question is, you've tried to delete data or update data. I have given you, on that table for this example, the only thing you can do is insert data. You can read the data and insert the data. I have not given you permissions to delete the data. So yeah, you're trying to update all of them or something, and you can't do it, right?
So I get not like giving your code away, but like what's the lot? Like why don't you want us working with different people on these projects?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So the question is, I can probably learn this really well if me and my buddy work through this together. And the answer is, in some cases, that is oh so true. But as soon as we kind of let that happen on a project, then we get one person who does it and another person who is barely keeping up or not keeping up. And so this is where you're showing me I can do this. And so yeah, it's got to be an individual endeavor. And there are totally some times when you're working with someone else and you're going, yeah, this is really good for both of us here. But it just ends up being a slippery slope. And the only way I've found to keep you off, to keep some people from sliding down that slope is to say stay off the slippery slope altogether. Work alone. Who can you talk to about this? TA? Me? Yeah. Your Father in heaven. Not necessarily in that order. You might start with Okay, other questions? I hate to let you go 4 minutes early because I could do something else at this time, but you'd probably be thrilled to let you go early. Anything else?
I can ask.
Okay, thanks for coming. Class dismissed.